What up, fam? How's it going? So, I was thinking about math. I was thinking about ratios. That's the thing that was going around, what was it, Twitter a while ago? That ratio plus L. But that's the thing. It's like it doesn't really matter how many over socialized points you have. What matters is what the ratio is. And if you can predict if there's any aberrant parts of that, take it out, and then appropriately compare that, that'll help you get a better grasp on your progress and things like that. When it comes to basically anything, I was a big fan of applying ratios to guess out the better members of Kiwi Farms, and it actually worked pretty good. If you have a higher ratio of points to messages, say 10 to 1, that is a good better determiner than if you have 500,000 points and are just there forever or whatever, or if you have a whole bunch of messages and no points because you're not interacting with a large group of people on the website. Just a little dumb, little antiquated thing. But I figured, there's Ted Kaczynski writes about the over-socialized male, and numbers are big in the modern over-socialized male. Even ratios have flaws, but they're closer than sheer numbers. Don't especially in the era of bots and especially in the era of AI. Seriously, don't take blank numbers as a straight expression of how you're doing. So, speaking of Kiwi Farms, I wanted to talk about a guy that I was friends with called Forgetful Jin. And I had many conversations with Forgetful Jin. And he was a very, very intelligent person. And he had like a nihilistic, depressive friend who managed to be a mod who wanted to ban everybody. And he ended up getting kicked out of the moderator role and leaving the website afterwards. That guy was named L50 Last Pack. And really kind of shook my conceptualization of Null when he made that guy a moderator, because he was just the most depressing and lying sack of shit. I mean, I don't mean to insult the guy, but he literally is one of the most depressing people I've ever met. So anyways, back to Forgetful Jin. Originally Jin, but forgot his original password. Forgetful Jin was a legacy member who made a lot of people very happy, and he could talk to basically anybody. But one day, some people attacked him in chat, and he, who could never back down from a fight, took the opposing view. I forgot what that's called when you constantly try to contradict people because it's like an instinct for you. You probably know the word that I'm looking for, the sort of personality type that's constantly contradicting and arguing just for the sake of argument. Now, I'm pretty sure Jin got that more from hanging out with L50, but regardless of where it came from, it was a big flaw that was exploited by two users that had gained extreme flash notoriety and even made friends with the moderators, and you know how things go. It's 2-on-1. They have establishment power. He doesn't. So what happens in this argument is he won't concede because they're lying about him, saying that he's a pedophile. He is being accused of being a pedophile because he thinks that... What was the argument that I kept on telling him wasn't really worth arguing? Oh yeah, he thinks that it's equivalent to express that children being in anime is a reasonable thing unless the people are deliberately directing it negatively. And we actually had an argument about this way back in the day, 2 years, 3 years prior, about this anime with this girl, and I didn't like it, and he stopped posting pictures of this after we had this argument. But it was this meme, essentially. So I think the biggest problem with Jin was the people that he hung around, but I watched him very closely, and I watched him for years. And he did not ever express any sort of pedophilic intent or any sort of apologetics, but unfortunately he got into this horrible argument about people who were accusing him of projecting pedophile apologetics. And I said, look, man, I know you're not a pedophile, but you need to stop arguing with these people that are calling you a pedophile. You know, this is a tactic that's employed online all the time to get people distracted and to get people locked into a corner where they're combating a false argument. So what ended up happening was Null, his cheeky little way, popped into chat after watching. He normally just watches on his chair. And he made a thread in a place where normal users can't access. He made this thread in a way to try and humiliate and get some sort of a false, skewed Democratic poll on whether or not Jin was a pedophile or not. And he ended up getting banned over that. And that's very disappointing because I had confronted him about this particular argument before. And I had found out, no, he was legitimately just using it as mimetic material, as jokes and stuff like that. And it never went farther from my perspective than jokes and memes. But it was around the time when McDonald's released that ad with the kid and the girl and the guy it was an anime ad that McDonald's had released, and that started this whole argument. It's very hazy in my memory because I wasn't paying very close attention to that particular argument, but you know, that's something that you can end up succumbing to if you end up getting locked into arguments with people arguing in bad faith, essentially. And everybody really missed Jin for a while, and I missed Jin for a while, but eventually, you know, it gets washed out and you get new people in, and that is, in my opinion, because Jin was a very, very beloved and very, very entertaining and very, very intelligent person. That is a dropping of quality for no reason. Zero reason. And I'm not sure what sort of mentality, other than the mentality of wanting complete control and wanting to divert all the attention up towards yourself, can institute that. But that will definitely cheapen, that sort of unnecessary policing will cheapen your community significantly. Well, and that's that. I wanted to get that off my chest, get that off my mind. You know, it's one thing to change your mind. It's another thing to pretend you have always had your newest opinion. And that's the big, big flaw with liars, is that people can see them. People can track them. People can put it on the graph and see that they're all over the place while saying that they're in a straight line. You know, and if you do this, you basically show a lack of respect for the people around you who are observing you. You know, Sam Hyde wasn't always sweet. He was kind of aggressive and mean back in like 2020, 2021. I remember him like screaming and like racing down the street where there was like houses right next to him going like 90 miles an hour. Very dangerous, could hit dogs, could hit squirrels, could hit children. Screaming, crying about COVID. That's not cool, you know. Going out shooting a bunch of guns is one thing, but like doing that next to people's houses and encouraging people, another thing, to go into debt and to participate in this rental lifestyle, which he did there for a period of time, was one of the reasons why, when there was a potential for Null and Sam to gravitate together, I, as an advisor at the time, advised him that that would not be a wise decision, that Sam would eat him. And I would say that's a big regret. That's one of the biggest regrets, I'd say. Because that, you know, Sam isn't the character he puts out. He's a funny man. And though he has very, very bad thoughts sometimes that wander through, I can actually watch him over the years get more and more control over that. You see, I don't look at just one fuck up. I look at the grand scheme of things. And that's exactly why I can tell that Forgetful Jin's not a pedophile, and that Sam Hyde is actually a decent and intelligent person who wants the best from the people around him. And that would have been a good example for Null to follow. And I regret that a lot, but it is what it is. Practice, practice, practice. If you fall, make it part of the dance. At the same time, always accept where your faults were, and that'll help you better, honestly and humbly, address them. Now, it doesn't mean you got to go around telling people your faults and your pitfalls, but don't be that person that says that they're perfect and then ends up getting absolutely humiliated by reality. You know, it isn't even people, it's just reality. It's by themselves, their own doing. So, I hope Biden lives to see a nuke get dropped on Tel Aviv. That would be funny. With their own actions. I mean, by the time that would happen, you know, the people who are really responsible for the issues will probably be in some bunker in Hungary or Latvia or some shit. But it would be nice for Biden to see the absolute and utter destruction of his life's work. And you know, I really think I'm touching onto something with that good old boy Zionist interlocutor, that the neo-Nazis and the Zionists are indeed one and the same. And it makes perfect sense based on the planned obsolescence sort of, why would you get rid of the thing you get paid for? Same with ICE, same with Mossad. And it makes sense of just based on action and the timeline. So you get a lot of aggressive militia groups to humiliate themselves and draw in vulnerable young men and humiliate them and get locked into this sort of gang, you know, a progenitor being the Masons, this sort of gang mentality where you're like locked in, you're humiliated to your grander community, and you view the scumbags that you're locked in a cage with as your family and not your real family, who's the actual important people in your life. That works perfectly in the grand scheme of the Zionists, and it's very easy to exploit people with sort of illogical racial biases, that allow them to easily fall for false advertising and that exact sort of, you get a good actor, you know, you get an Enrique Tarrio, you get like whoever's who that skinhead is that screams super loud, that goes around like Ohio and Indiana and stuff. That guy is probably best friends with people of the Long Nose tribe. And that's the funny thing about all this, is like regular people are more critical of the genuine things that are happening in Israel than the neo-Nazis, because the neo-Nazis believe that the Israelis should be in that spot, that every single person should be in a specific spot, which has its historical contingency in you have your flaws and you have your strengths, and those are stacked up in your ancestry, and you can tell them. I was going over this last episode, but they, as most theosophical societies do, take parts of history and culture and warp them and manipulate them into serving their grand scheme. And the grand scheme, you know, if you look at the theosophical societies, theosophical religions symbol, it's an Ouroboros and a Star of David and a Nazi symbol, the reversed sun symbol, the swastika, all stuck together. Isn't that funny? And that's been around since 1870. So keep that in mind. Black Panthers are also terrorists. The Black Panthers are the black equivalent of Nazis. And as I have said before, black and white aren't real terms historically, culturally. They only apply to North American statecraft. And so the Black Panthers, which is a racist militia, just like a lot of the other racist militias out there, aberrant militias, not non-aberrant militias, but aberrant militias. Not the sort of stuff that, you know, the Boogaloo Boys are associated with, or where Kyle Rittenhouse came from. No. Obviously, there's many, many good militias, and there's just a good culture of practicing with guns in America, and that should never, ever be relinquished, ever. Across the board, people say that is a dumb thing to do, is to give up your guns. But the Black Panthers are indeed exactly the same as the Ku Klux Klan. They're just a shadow reflection of it. And they hated the hero Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They hated him by the end of his life because he was sticking up for poor white people as well as poor black people. He was actually narrowing in on the real issues, and so the CIA had to shoot him and then humiliate him for the decades to come. And it's always very, very sad when people, hate on Martin Luther King Jr. as if he was a Black Panther always, and not just when he was younger and then despised by them later on. The same as any good person who left the KKK would be despised by them. In dog training, the last thing you want to do is reward bad behavior. That's the last thing you want to do, and it really does explain a lot about Joe Biden, how his dogs act, and how his upper allies act, lower allies act, how, NATO has been launching missiles into Russia, despite the fact that they have nothing to do with Ukraine. That's the upper dog getting out of control, and the lower dog getting out of control is Israel running amok, tearing up all the children in the Middle East. That is exactly because of Biden's poor behavior, and one of the many, many reasons why Trump coming in cannot possibly be worse. Straight up, because he does have the attitude of a leader. Unlike Biden, the kid senator, somebody who's been in politics for longer than anybody, who all he knows is politics, all he knows is being a puppet. That's all he knows. Whereas Trump has literally spent most of his life outside of politics, and that is a major, major boon in his court. The Illuminati is not going to steal the black and white. They're not going to steal the checkers. You know who owns that? The Celtic people. The Celts own the black and white. The Cornish have black and white triangles, and the Britons, or the Brehonides of Brittany in northwestern France, they have the black and white checkers. That's theirs. The Illuminati does not get to steal that. Fuck them. I notice a lot of Celtic horns have been refashioned into nasty, disgusting exhaust systems, and that is gross because those horns were for war. Those horns were for war, and people have been blaring them outside of infants' windows and in front of the livestock. That's never something that our ancestors did, and it's a mockery, and it disgusts me. Narwhal tusks were a major Arctic export, and they were sold as unicorn horns. Isn't that interesting? I like that a lot. That's an interesting piece of history right there, kind of a synthesis between old and new. While also fantasy, false advertising as well. But that's where that comes from. Back to the 12th century, 13th century, the Norse were selling unicorn horns. Christians love bears and horses and dogs. Only sick fucks don't like animals. Only sick fucks can't empathize or love animals that are so much weaker than them. It's one thing to be, to curve that enthusiasm when it comes to wolves and when it comes to like wild bears, like grizzly bears and shit. But, both the pagans and the Christians tamed and loved animals. And the totemists as well. And you see this in a lot of animist and especially animist, and you see this in a lot of fetishist societies too, where they have sort of a warped mask, and then they have kind of like horns and stuff, and they have these animal-like dances. It's fascinating, You gotta be a real sick fuck, completely out of touch with your ancestry to not like animals, to think that concrete and steel is somehow a replacement for the soft, warm world that we have been burning. Why gold? Well, remember the torques that the Celtic people wore. Ancient people valued it. The electrons around it would move close to the speed of light, and so it shines like the golden light of the sun, and so it's called gold. And it reflects when you wear it as jewelry on your countenance, in a very illuminating way. And that's beautiful from a technical perspective, of course. And so people saw these beautiful little tokens as valuable, and so they assigned the value to it. And eventually it spiraled out of control and destroyed the actual beauty that it once came from. Well, I think I'd end this little short episode on a story that I'm not super proud of, but I will share anyways. I gave my friend a scar once after I spun my katana around after covering it with lighter fluid, and I spun it around when it was on fire, and then I held it up to when it went out. I held it up to his neck for dramatic effect, not realizing it was still very, very hot. And I ended up giving him a scar. I gave him a real bad burn right here. And he went to a job interview with it, and he, of course, didn't get a call back. I feel really bad about that, but I'll send this episode to him. Maybe he gets a, chuckle out of that. Love you, bro. All right, guys. Take care.